The woman who gave me life told me I wasn't family anymore, just because I stopped sending her money. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Marin. I'm 29 and live in Oregon. For years, I sent my mom money every month. She always said she needed it for bills, food, or medicine. I believed her because she raised me alone after my dad left. I felt like it was my duty to help her. She used to say, "You're all I have in this world," and I took those words seriously. Even when I moved to Denver for work, I kept sending her money. Sometimes it was $300, sometimes $500. I skipped vacations, avoided eating out, and even delayed buying new clothes, just to make sure she had what she needed. I thought I was doing the right thing, that this was what a loving daughter should do. Then one day, everything changed. My cousin Tessa called me out of the blue. She sounded nervous and said, "Marin, I think you should know something. Your mom isn't struggling like she says." I asked what she meant, and Tessa told me that my mom had been going on weekend trips, buying expensive handbags, and even bragging to relatives about the money I sent her. At first, I refused to believe it. But then I saw pictures online of her at a casino and fancy restaurant. My heart broke. I realized all those nights I stayed up worrying about her bills. She was out spending my hard-earned money on luxuries. I called her to talk about it, trying to stay calm. I asked if she could explain where the money went. She immediately got defensive, yelling, "You're so ungrateful. After everything I've done for you." Then she said something that cut deep. "You're just like your father, selfish and heartless." That was the night I decided to stop sending money. The next morning, she sent me a text. "Since you don't care about family, don't call yourself my daughter anymore." I sat there staring at the message, feeling like I'd been punched in the chest. She was my only parent, and now she was choosing money over me. Months passed in silence. I started saving for myself for the first time. I went to therapy and began to heal. I missed her, but I didn't miss the manipulation. 2 years later, Tessa called again. My mom was sick and wanted to see me. I thought about ignoring it but decided to go. When I walked into the hospital room, she smiled weakly and said, "I knew you'd forgive me." I looked at her and said softly, "I do forgive you, but I'm done being your bank and your guilt target." She turned away, and I walked out feeling lighter. For the first time, I chose myself. Family should mean love and respect, not control and debt. Sometimes walking away is the only way to find peace. When I was little, I thought love was something you had to earn. My mom, Deborah, made sure of that. To everyone outside our house, she looked like the sweetest woman, smiling at neighbors, bringing cookies to church events, acting like the perfect single mom. But behind closed doors, things were different. She didn't shout much. Instead, she used guilt like a knife. Every nice thing she did came with a price. When my dad left, I was 8. I remember the sound of the door closing and my mom sitting at the table, smoking and crying. After that, she told me again and again that we only had each other, that I had to be strong for her. At first, I wanted to. I wanted to make her proud, to keep her from crying like that again. By the time I was 12, I had learned that helping her meant doing chores that weren't meant for a kid. She'd call me her little partner, but it didn't feel like a partnership. If I didn't do something right, if I forgot to clean or didn't answer when she called, she'd go quiet for hours, sometimes days. That silence felt worse than yelling. I'd always end up apologizing, even if I didn't know what I'd done wrong. When I turned 15, I started working after school. I bagged groceries at a local store, and she made sure I handed her most of my paycheck. She said it was to help with the bills, but she also bought herself small things. New shoes, a bottle of perfume, little treats. I told myself she deserved it. She worked hard, and maybe this was how good daughters showed love. It became a pattern that shaped everything I did. If I brought home a good grade, she'd smile and say, "See what happens when you try?" But if I wanted to hang out with friends or spend money on myself, she'd sigh and say, "Must be nice to be so selfish." Those words stayed in my head for years. By the time I graduated high school, I didn't even question it anymore. I got a second job at a diner, and all my money went straight into her hand. Other kids saved for college. I was helping her pay rent. I didn't see it as unfair, just normal. I thought all families worked like this, that love meant giving everything you had and expecting nothing back. Looking back now, I realized she trained me to believe her comfort was my responsibility. I didn't understand that love shouldn't hurt or cost so much. Back then, I just wanted her to be happy. I didn't know that in her eyes, I was never a daughter. I was her safety net. And the saddest part is, I didn't even notice. When I turned 22, I packed my old car and drove to Denver. The mountains looked like a promise, a chance to breathe, to start my own life. I found a small apartment with peeling paint but sunlight in the mornings, and for the first time, I felt like I belonged to myself. I got an entry-level office job downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and it paid enough for rent and groceries. For a few weeks, I thought I had escaped the weight of home. I bought a thrift store couch, learned to cook pasta that didn't stick, even laughed with new coworkers during lunch breaks. I remember one evening sitting by the window, thinking maybe, just maybe, I could build something different. Then my phone buzzed. It was my mom. At first, her messages sounded casual, little check-ins, asking if I was eating well or if I'd made any friends. But by the third week, the tone changed. She reminded me how hard things were back home, how expensive everything had become, how lonely she felt. The words "I raised you alone" kept showing up, tucked between her guilt and complaints. Every text carried a quiet demand. I sent her some money, telling myself it was just to help her get through a tough month. I wired $300, even though it meant skipping my internet bill. The relief in her reply made me feel useful again, like I had done something good. But soon it wasn't enough. The next time she called, she sounded teary, saying the electric company was threatening to shut things off. So I sent more. The pattern grew quickly. Each time I tried to set a limit, she found new reasons. She said the car needed repairs, that the fridge broke, that the neighbor borrowed money and never returned it. I wanted to believe her, even when doubt crept in. I told myself she was struggling, that family helps family. Months passed, and I started planning my paychecks around her needs instead of mine. When coworkers talked about weekend trips, I smiled and said I was saving, though my savings account was nearly empty. I skipped dinners out, telling people I preferred to cook at home. The truth was, I couldn't afford anything extra. Sometimes I'd see something small I wanted, a second-hand bookshelf, a cheap pair of boots, and then I'd remember her voice saying, "You wouldn't have that job if I hadn't worked so hard for you." I'd put the item back every time. I had moved across states to find freedom, but her words followed me like a shadow. No matter how far I went, she was there in every text, every late-night call, every pang of guilt when I hesitated to send more money. I had escaped the house, but not her hold on me. It happened on a quiet Friday evening. I was sitting in my apartment, half listening to music while folding laundry, when my phone lit up with a call from Tessa. We hadn't spoken in a while, but hearing her voice always felt familiar. She started chatting about family updates, little things about her job and her kids. It was easy conversation, the kind that made me forget how far away I'd moved. Then she said something that froze me. She laughed lightly and said, "Your mom's been living it up lately. I can't believe she went on another little trip last month." I blinked, thinking I must have heard wrong. "Trip?" I asked. There was a pause on the other end. Tessa hesitated, realizing she'd said too much. "Oh, I mean just a small thing." She mentioned she needed a break. My chest tightened. I pressed, asking where she'd gone. After a long pause, Tessa sighed and told me about the weekend getaway to Vegas, the spa visit, the new handbag she showed off at a family barbecue. She said it in a soft voice, like she didn't want to be part of it. She even joked about how nice it is having a daughter who helps her keep a comfortable life. I didn't say much after that. We finished the call quickly, and I sat there, staring at my phone. My hands felt numb. I thought about the months I'd skipped meals, the nights I'd stayed up worrying about her bills, and the messages that made me feel guilty for not sending more. All that time, she was out spending money like it came from thin air, my money. My mind ran through every excuse she had ever given me. The late fees, the broken fridge, the empty pantry. I had believed every word. I wanted to believe her. She was my mom, and I had built my whole sense of duty around her needs. But now, the picture was breaking apart piece by piece. I tried to tell myself there had to be a reason. Maybe Tessa got it wrong. Maybe my mom had finally saved up a little and wanted to treat herself. But deep down I knew. The pattern fit too perfectly. Every story, every plea for help, it had always come right after payday. That night, I walked around my apartment for hours. The silence felt heavy, pressing on my chest. My phone buzzed again, a text from her, asking for a small loan until next week. I stared at the screen, realizing how easily I would have said yes just a day before. Now the words looked different, sharper. I didn't answer her that night. For the first time, I hesitated, not because I didn't want to help, but because I finally saw the truth. The person I'd been trying so hard to rescue didn't want saving. She wanted control, and I had been handing it to her one paycheck at a time. I called her the next evening, trying to keep my voice steady. I told myself I just wanted to understand, to clear up the confusion in my head. When she answered, she sounded cheerful, the same easy tone she used whenever she wanted something. I asked about the trips, the shopping, the stories Tessa mentioned. For a second, there was silence on the line, just her breath catching. Then her voice hardened. "So now you're spying on me?" she snapped. I said I wasn't, that I just wanted the truth. She laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. "You think you know everything, don't you? After all I've done for you, this is how you talk to me." I tried to stay calm, telling her I'd never minded helping, but needed to know where the money was going. Her tone rose with every word. "You ungrateful child. You think I owe you explanations? You wouldn't have anything without me." Her words came fast, hot, meant to sting. I sat there listening, gripping the phone tighter, trying not to cry. Then she said it, the sentence that felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. "I should have never had you. You're just like your father, selfish and cold." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I hadn't heard her talk about him in years. The only thing I remembered about him was the way she used his name as a curse. Hearing her compare me to him felt like being erased. I stayed quiet, letting her talk, though every word chipped at something inside me. She accused me of forgetting where I came from, of being heartless for questioning her. She said money was the only way children showed respect to their parents. When she finally stopped, the silence stretched between us. I whispered, "I love you, Mom, but this isn't love." She scoffed, called me dramatic, and hung up. I stared at my phone, half expecting her to call back like she used to after arguments. But the screen stayed dark. That night, I sat at my kitchen table long after midnight. I replayed every moment of the conversation, every word she'd used to twist the blame. My chest ached, not from anger, but from the final understanding that nothing I did would ever be enough for her. She didn't want help, she wanted control. I opened my banking app, scrolled through all the transfers I'd sent her, and felt a quiet shame wash over me. Then I made a decision. I wouldn't send her another dollar. Not because I stopped caring, but because I needed to start caring about myself. I went to bed with tears on my face, knowing she'd wake up angry when the money didn't come. But for the first time, I didn't feel scared of her reaction. I felt free, even if freedom hurt. The morning light slipped through the blinds when my phone buzzed. Still half asleep, I reached for it, thinking it was a work message. Instead, I saw her name. The text was short, sharp, and cold. "Since you don't care about family, don't call yourself my daughter anymore." I read it once, then again. My hands started to shake. There was no explanation, no warmth, not even a question, just a final sentence meant to cut deep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the words until they blurred. For years, I had built my life around her approval. Now she was taking away the one title that had defined me. The apartment was quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy. I wanted to cry, but nothing came out. I just felt empty. My mind kept replaying our last call, the anger in her voice, the way she spat those words about my father. Part of me thought she'd cool off, that she'd call to apologize or at least try to explain. But the longer I waited, the clearer it became that this wasn't an argument, it was a choice. I tried to distract myself, made coffee, opened my laptop, pretended to focus on emails, but every few minutes, I found myself staring at my phone again. No new messages, no missed calls, just that one sentence sitting there like a bruise I couldn't ignore. The strangest thing was how familiar the pain felt. When my dad left years ago, I'd told myself I'd never feel that kind of abandonment again. But now it was happening all over. Only this time, I hadn't been left behind, I had walked away. That made it hurt in a different way. I went for a walk around the block, hoping the air would clear my head. Every step felt heavier than the last. Families passed me on the sidewalk, parents laughing with their kids, people talking on phones, and I wondered if any of them knew how lucky they were. I'd spent so long trying to keep a family that didn't want me unless I was paying for it. When I got back home, I turned off my phone. I couldn't look at that message anymore. It wasn't just cruel, it was final. Still, a small part of me kept hoping she'd reach out, say she didn't mean it. But deep down, I knew she had meant every word. That night, lying in bed, the emptiness settled in. It felt like losing a mother and a home at once, even though I was already far away. But beneath the grief, something else started to form, a quiet understanding that maybe this was what real freedom looked like. Painful, yes, but honest. For the first time, I didn't owe anyone anything. Weeks turned into months, and I kept my phone on silent. I couldn't bring myself to delete her number, but I also couldn't read old messages without feeling a pull I wasn't ready for. The quiet was strange at first. I had spent years waiting for her calls, dreading them but still needing them. Now, the silence felt both peaceful and hollow. I threw myself into work, staying late, taking on new projects, anything to keep my mind busy. My boss noticed and started trusting me with more responsibility. When I got promoted, I wanted to share the news with someone, but the first person who came to mind was the one who had told me I wasn't her daughter anymore. I smiled through the congratulations from coworkers, then went home to an empty apartment. It wasn't loneliness exactly. It was something deeper, a quiet ache that sat in my chest. I started seeing a therapist after a coworker gently suggested it. The first few sessions were hard. I didn't know how to talk about what had happened without feeling guilty. My therapist asked me once, "When was the last time you did something just for you?" I didn't have an answer. That question stayed with me. I began small. I opened a savings account and decided it would be for me. Not for emergencies at home, not for anyone else. I started putting away a little each month. Watching the balance grow gave me a feeling I hadn't known before, safety that didn't depend on anyone else. Outside of work, I learned how to enjoy quiet moments. I bought a small plant for my kitchen window, cooked meals I actually wanted to eat, and even took a weekend trip alone. It felt strange to spend money without guilt, but also freeing. Still, healing wasn't simple. Some nights I woke up thinking I heard my phone buzz. Holidays were the hardest. I'd walk through stores filled with families shopping together, hear songs that used to play in our house, and feel a sting deep in my chest. I'd imagine her sitting somewhere, maybe talking to relatives, pretending I didn't exist. That thought hurt more than the silence itself. But over time, the pain softened. I realized that missing someone didn't mean I had to go back to them. I could love her from a distance, even if she never loved me the way I needed. I learned how to build a life around peace instead of guilt. I still had moments when memories came rushing back. Her voice, the way she used to say I owed her everything. But those moments no longer ruled. The quiet that once felt unbearable became something steady, something I could live with. It wasn't the silence of loss anymore. It was the sound of my own strength. 2 years passed before I heard her name spoken to me again. It was a gray afternoon when my phone rang, and Tessa's name flashed on the screen. Her voice sounded uneasy, softer than usual. She told me my mother had been in and out of the hospital for weeks, that her health was getting worse. I didn't say anything at first. The words felt distant, like they belonged to someone else's story. Then Tessa said she'd been asking. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. 100 thoughts ran through my mind, the arguments, the insults, the silence that followed. I could almost hear her voice again, sharp and heavy with blame. Part of me wanted to hang up, to protect the peace I had finally found. But another part of me, the one that still remembered her laugh from years ago, couldn't ignore the call completely. Tessa didn't pressure me. She just said, "She's weaker now, Mary. Maybe she wants to make things right." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, thinking about everything that had happened since the last time we spoke. The money, the manipulation, the way she'd told me I wasn't her daughter. It all came back like a flood. I tried to convince myself not to go. I reminded myself how hard it had been to rebuild, how much it had taken to feel whole again. But something deeper kept tugging at me. It wasn't love, not anymore. It was something closer to unfinished business. A part of me that needed to face her, not for her sake, but for mine. I took a few days before deciding. I booked a ticket and packed light, just enough for a short trip. The night before I left, I sat on my bed, staring at the phone, half expecting her to call again. She didn't. I wondered if she even knew I was coming. When the plane landed, everything felt strange and familiar at once. The city I'd run from looked smaller. I drove past the streets I used to know, the ones where every memory felt like a weight on my chest. By the time I reached the hospital, my hands were trembling on the steering wheel. Inside, the smell of antiseptic and the low hum of machines filled the air. Tessa met me in the hallway, eyes tired but kind. She said my mom was sleeping, but that she had been asking if I'd come. My stomach twisted. I didn't know what I would say to her, or if I wanted to say anything at all. Still, I walked toward her room. Each step felt like crossing a bridge between who I used to be and who I had become. I wasn't there out of duty or guilt. I was there to close the circle, to face the woman who had broken me, and finally decide for myself what forgiveness really meant. When I stepped into the hospital room, the air felt thick, heavy with the scent of medicine and something unspoken. She looked smaller than I remembered, her hair grayer, her face thinner. The woman lying there barely resembled the one who used to tower over me with words sharper than knives. For a moment, she didn't see me. Then her eyes opened, and when they met mine, I saw a flicker of surprise before her lips curved into a faint smile. "You came," she whispered, her voice rough but still carrying that same tone, the one that always assumed I'd return, no matter what she'd done. "I knew you'd forgive me." I stood at the foot of the bed, unsure if I should move closer. The years of distance, of silence, hung between us like a curtain that couldn't be lifted. Her smile wavered when I didn't respond right away. I took a breath, my chest tight but steady. "I did forgive you," I said quietly, "but not the way you think." She blinked, confusion flickering across her face. I continued, choosing each word carefully. "I forgive you for what you did, but I'm not here to fix things. I'm not here to send money or take care of your guilt. I'm not your bank, and I'm not your target anymore." Her hand, weak but trembling, clutched at the blanket. For a moment, I thought she might cry, but instead her eyes narrowed, the old spark flashing through. "So you're really done?" she said, her tone suddenly cold again, just like before. I met her stare without looking away. "I've been done for years," I told her. "You just never noticed." The words hung in the air, and for once, she didn't have a response. The monitors beeped softly in the background, the sound almost rhythmic, like a heartbeat marking the end of something long overdue. I stood there, looking at the woman who had shaped so much of my pain, and realized I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't feel anything close to rage, just a deep, quiet release. She turned her face away, staring at the window, pretending not to care. I could tell pride still mattered more to her than truth. Maybe that would never change. And yet, even as she avoided my eyes, I felt lighter. It wasn't the reunion she might have imagined, but it was the closure I needed. I stayed for a few minutes longer, said a polite goodbye to Tessa in the hallway, and walked outside. The late afternoon sun hit my face, warm and steady. I took a deep breath, realizing I hadn't felt that kind of calm in years. In that moment, I finally understood. Forgiveness wasn't about erasing the past or giving someone another chance. It was about freeing yourself from their grip. And as I walked away from the hospital, I knew that chapter was closed for good. I stepped out of the hospital doors and felt the weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying lift from my shoulders. For years, I had chased her approval, given her my time, my money, my energy, and now none of it mattered. Not because she rejected me, but because I had finally stopped letting her control me. That was my victory. The wind brushed against my face, and for the first time in decades, I felt steady, whole. I didn't need to check my phone for her calls, didn't need to wonder if she was pleased with me, didn't need to bend myself to fit her expectations. I had taken back the part of myself that she had always tried to own. That, more than anything, was the revenge I never realized I wanted. As I walked to my car, I thought about all the holidays I had spent feeling guilty, the nights I had cried alone because I wasn't enough. I realized I would never let someone else define my worth again. I could love people, yes, but I would never sacrifice my peace to make them feel safe or admired. That power, my own choice, was freedom. Later, sitting in a small cafe, I overheard a family laughing together. A pang of nostalgia hit me, but instead of longing, it brought clarity. Family is often glorified as unconditional, but the truth is, it should be reciprocal. It should nurture, not drain. I smiled quietly to myself and whispered, almost laughing, "Only when family acts like it." I thought about my past, all the mistakes, the guilt, the exhaustion. I didn't regret surviving, and I didn't resent myself. Every step, every tear, every difficult decision had led me to this moment. My story wasn't about abandonment or betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, defining my limits, and realizing that love and respect must be earned in both directions. By the time I got home, I felt different, lighter, almost unrecognizable to the old Marin who once bent to every demand. I opened my savings account and looked at the balance. This money was mine, a small symbol of control, of dignity, of life lived for myself. I smiled again. Her rejection no longer hurt me. Her manipulation no longer held sway. The real victory was not in making her feel anything, but in the quiet strength I carried within. That was the peace I had been seeking, the revenge that was truly mine. I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath, and realized that losing her as a mother hadn't been an ending. It had been a beginning, a chance to find myself, to honor my own worth, and to finally live untethered. I didn't need her approval, and I didn't need her love to survive. I was enough. I had become enough. Hey besties, thanks for sticking with me till the end of this emotional journey. Marin finally stood up for herself, faced her past, and reclaimed her life. She learned that real strength comes from setting boundaries, not from pleasing others. Betrayal hurt, but it led her to freedom and self-respect. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. See you next time.